4 submarines. Each one can fire up to 154 Tomahawk cruise missiles in a single strike. No other vessel in the United States Navy carries that kind of precision firepower, surface ship or submarine included. And according to a report from Military Watch magazine, all 4 are approaching retirement, with no dedicated successor program built to replace them. That claim is driving fresh debate among defense analysts this year. Not whether these submarines did their job, whether the Navy will ever field anything like them again. By the end of this video, you'll know what these submarines are, why their missile capacity is so unusual, what the Navy's newer submarine classes can and can't do instead, and where the real capability question comes from. Start with what these boats actually are, because the backstory explains why replacing them isn't simple. USS Ohio, USS Michigan, USS Florida, and USS Georgia weren't built as cruise missile submarines. They were laid down in the late 1970s and commissioned in the 1980s as Ohio-class ballistic missile submarines, designated SSBN, built to carry Trident nuclear missiles as part of the United States sea-based nuclear deterrent. That's the same class of submarine that still carries most of America's deployed nuclear warheads today. By the early 2000s, arms control agreements were cutting the number of deployed strategic missile launchers the United States was allowed to keep active. Instead of scrapping 4 of the oldest Ohio-class hulls outright, the Navy converted them into a different kind of weapon entirely. Between 2002 and 2008, the Navy ran a conversion program reported to cost several billion dollars across the 4 boats that stripped out their ballistic missile role and rebuilt them as SSGNs, guided missile submarines built around conventional cruise missiles instead of nuclear warheads. Here's the engineering detail that matters, and it's worth slowing down for, because it explains the whole story. Each Ohio-class hull has 24 large missile tubes running down its length, originally built to hold 1 Trident nuclear missile each. In the SSGN conversion, 2 of those 24 tubes became lockout trunks, essentially airlocks that let Navy SEALs and other special operations personnel leave and re-enter the submarine while it stays submerged. The remaining 22 tubes were each fitted with a multiple all-up round canister, a rack that holds 7 Tomahawk cruise missiles per tube instead of 1 large missile. 22 tubes, 7 missiles each. That math is where the 154 number comes from. And according to Navy and defense industry sources, it's the largest cruise missile magazine ever carried by one vessel in the United States Navy, well beyond what any destroyer, cruiser, or other submarine carries. Worth pausing on what a Tomahawk actually is for anyone unfamiliar with the term. It's a long-range, subsonic cruise missile, launched from a ship or submarine, flying low and guided by satellite navigation to a precise target hundreds of miles away. It's not a ballistic missile, and it doesn't carry a nuclear warhead in the SSGN's magazines. It's the Navy's standard conventional land attack weapon, used repeatedly since the 1990s in strikes from Iraq to Libya to Syria. A single SSGN, fully loaded, can in theory deliver more of these in one salvo than an entire surface strike group. Some background helps here too, separate from anything specific to this story. A submarine's core advantage over a surface ship is that it can approach a coastline undetected and stay there, submerged, for weeks without giving away its position, which matters a lot for a weapon meant to strike without warning. That's the idea behind what the U.S. military calls prompt global strike, holding the ability to hit a distant, time-sensitive target quickly without needing a forward airbase, permission to overfly another country's airspace, or advance warning that would remove the element of surprise. A submarine carrying over 100 cruise missiles is one of the more efficient prompt strike platforms the Navy has ever fielded, and that's the specific capability at the center of this debate, not the submarine's ballistic missile heritage. Most people who don't follow submarine programs closely assume a Virginia-class attack submarine, being newer, must simply be a better version of the same idea. It isn't that simple. Newer doesn't automatically mean a bigger magazine. The Virginia-class was designed first as a fast attack submarine, built for hunting other submarines and ships and for intelligence gathering, with the payload module added later specifically to claw back some of the strike capacity the Navy knew it would eventually lose when the SSGNs retired. It's a genuine partial fix, engineered on purpose. It was never sized to match 154 missiles on its own. I spent a while going through the public record on this program, and one detail kept nagging me. These aren't paper submarines that exist only in press releases. They have combat history. In 2011, during Operation Odyssey Dawn, the opening phase of the international intervention in Libya, USS Florida fired more than 90 Tomahawk missiles at Libyan air defense targets, according to Navy accounts of the operation. It was the SSGN's combat debut, and defense observers at the time called it one of the largest single-platform cruise missile salvos ever launched from a submarine. That's not a hypothetical capability. It's been used, at scale, in an actual campaign, and it worked as designed. Beyond raw missile capacity, the conversion also gave these 4 boats a second job that rarely makes headlines. Each SSGN can carry and support more than 6 special operations personnel for extended periods, along with dry deck shelters that let SEAL teams deploy from the submarine underwater. So the SSGNs aren't just missile trucks. According to Navy descriptions of the platform, they double as clandestine forward staging bases for special operations, forces, and, reportedly, for intelligence collection, all from a hull that can loiter undetected off a coastline for weeks. So why doesn't a submarine class with that record and that range of missions have an obvious heir? This is where the report gets more contested and where it's important to separate confirmed fact from analyst assessment. What's confirmed? The Navy hasn't announced a dedicated program to build a new class of large-scale conventional missile submarines to replace the SSGNs when they leave service. What's Military Watch magazine's assessment, not an official Navy statement, is that this leaves a real gap in the Navy's ability to deliver a very large conventional missile strike from a single stealthy platform, because neither of the submarine's likely institutional successors is built to do the same job. Take the 2 candidates most often cited as the closest thing to a replacement. The Virginia-class attack submarine, the Navy's current production line of fast attack boats, comes in a version fitted with the Virginia payload module and added mid-body section with 4 extra large diameter tubes. According to Navy and shipbuilder descriptions of the module, each of those 4 tubes can hold multiple Tomahawks in a canister similar to the SSGNs, adding roughly 24 or more missiles to the 12 already carried in the boat's forward vertical launch tubes. Added up, and a Virginia-class boat fitted with the payload module carries somewhere around 40 missiles. Meaningful. Useful. More than most other submarines in the fleet. Still not 154. The other candidate, the Columbia-class, isn't really a candidate at all. Columbia is the Navy's new ballistic missile submarine, the direct successor to the Ohio-class SSBNs still carrying Trident nuclear missiles today. Its entire design mission is strategic nuclear deterrence, carrying Trident 2D5 missiles on continuous, quiet patrol somewhere in the world's oceans at all times. It was never built, and isn't being built, as a conventional strike platform with a large Tomahawk magazine. Reports describing it as a stand-in for SSGN firepower are describing something the boat was never designed to do. What strikes me about this case is that it isn't really a story about a sudden loss. It's a story about a gap that was visible years in advance and about how hard large-scale ship replacement programs are to execute on schedule, even when everyone can see them coming. Here's the part that doesn't quite add up on the surface. The Navy has known the reactor cores and hull service lives on these 4 submarines are finite since the conversion program itself was approved 2 decades ago. This isn't a surprise retirement sprung on anyone. Public Navy budget documents and Government Accountability Office reports going back years have flagged submarine industrial base constraints, meaning limited shipyard capacity, a stretched supplier base, and skilled workforce shortages as a persistent drag on how fast the Navy can even build the Virginia-class boats already on order, let alone stand up an entirely new class on top of that. The Columbia-class program itself, according to the Government Accountability Office, has faced its own cost growth and schedule pressure, and it's the Navy's top shipbuilding priority, competing for the same shipyards and the same skilled labor as every other submarine program. So if you're asking why nobody built a one-for-one replacement, part of the honest answer is that the industrial base building today's submarines is already stretched thin producing boats that were on the books before this question ever came up. Reports describing the exact retirement timeline vary in specifics, but the broad picture from defense reporting holds steady. The 4 Ohio-class SSGNs are expected to leave service over the back half of this decade as their extended reactor cores and hull service lives run out, with USS Ohio, the oldest of the 4, furthest along that clock. No dedicated large-scale conventional missile submarine class has been funded to enter service in that same window. There's a detail in how these boats were originally built that's easy to forget once you're focused on missile counts. All 4 began their careers during the Cold War, part of a fleet built to guarantee the United States could respond to a nuclear attack even if every other part of the military was destroyed first. That original mission required them to be nearly silent, extremely hard to track, and able to stay hidden at sea for months. When they were converted to SSGNs, the Navy didn't have to build stealth into them. It was already there. That's arguably the real reason this magazine matters as much as it does. It isn't just a big number of missiles, it's a big number of missiles on a hull that's exceptionally hard to find in the first place, a combination the Navy isn't currently funded to replace on a one-for-one basis. Here's the take that will probably get us some pushback. I think the real story here isn't a lack of foresight. It's a funding priority choice made repeatedly across budget cycles to protect the Columbia-class and the shipbuilding lines tied to it, while treating a 154 missile conventional strike capability as something that could be quietly absorbed into a handful of Virginia payload module boats instead of replaced outright. That may turn out to be a reasonable bet, given how much strategic deterrence rightly matters. It may also turn out to be the kind of gap nobody notices until an actual crisis makes it obvious. What do you think? Is spreading that firepower across a larger number of smaller magazines on more submarines a reasonable modernization? Or is losing a 154 missile single platform strike capability a real cut to what the Navy can bring to bear on short notice? I'm genuinely curious where people land on this one, because reasonable people who follow this program closely disagree. Worth being precise about what isn't confirmed here. There's no public evidence of a classified follow-on SSGN program hidden from budget documents, and defense reporters who cover submarine acquisition closely haven't surfaced one. The Navy's future SSN-X attack submarine, still in early design work, hasn't had its payload capacity or mission set finalized in public documents, so any claim about what it will or won't eventually carry is speculation at this point, not fact. What is fact is that, as of today, no submarine in the Navy's currently funded shipbuilding plan is designed to carry anywhere near 154 conventional missiles. Put yourself in the position of a Navy planner in the early 2000s, looking at 4 Ohio-class hulls that still had useful reactor life left on them right as arms control limits meant they couldn't keep their nuclear missiles. Scrap submarines with years of service left, or find them a new job. The SSGN conversion was the answer, and for the 2 decades since, it's quietly worked. The question this report raises isn't whether that decision was right. It's what happens now that the clock on those same hulls is finally running out, with no equivalent decision made this time to build something to match them. Where does that leave things? 4 submarines with a genuine combat record and an unmatched missile magazine are aging out on a schedule the Navy has known about for years. Their most direct answer, the Virginia payload module boats, delivers real but partial capacity. Their nominal same-class successor, Columbia, isn't built for this mission at all. And the industrial base that would need to build something new is already committed to programs already running behind schedule. What remains genuinely open, rather than settled, is how the Navy's next-generation attack submarine design, still years from a keel being laid, will ultimately take shape, and whether future budget requests restore anything close to a dedicated large-scale conventional missile submarine. Those decisions haven't been made in public yet, and anyone telling you today exactly what that future submarine will carry is guessing, not reporting. Will the Navy close this gap before it becomes operationally significant? Or will it manage without a direct replacement and rely on distributed firepower across a larger number of boats instead? Comment YES if you think the Navy fills this gap in time, or no if you think this specific capability is gone for good. If you want to track where this actually goes, watch how fast Virginia-class deliveries happen over the next few years, because that number, more than any press release, will tell you whether this gap gets filled or simply becomes permanent.